Welcome, everybody. We're glad you could join us today for the Energy Innovation Forum on nuclear energy. The goal of these Energy Innovation Forums is to bring together academics, community leaders, industry leaders, and policymakers to explore the ins and outs of emerging energy technologies and to help inform policy solutions in Texas. Today, we have some awesome speakers, starting off with Marc Nichol, who is Senior Director of New Reactors at the Nuclear Energy Institute. We have Representative Gary Gates from the Texas House and District 28 over in the Richmond area. We have Jordan Robison, VP of Engineering and Program Management with Natura Resources, and Dr. Derek Haas, Associate Professor of Nuclear and Radiation Engineering at UT Austin. So before we get started, the Energy Innovation Forum folks would like to recognize people who made this possible, including Patricia Zavala and Lindsay Lambert with PowerHouse Texas. If you guys want to wave, be recognized for all of your hard work. Good stuff. Polite applause are in order. Yes, yes. PowerHouse, also, I almost forgot, Christina Cheesemadia with the Nuclear Energy Institute. Are you around? There she is. So next slide. PowerHouse Texas was formed last year by the Texas Caucus on Climate and Energy. PowerHouse Texas is a nonpartisan nonprofit that educates and cultivates energy policy leaders through these energy innovation forums, as well as the Energy Policy Fellowship, where six fellows have been placed in 3 Republican offices and 3 Democratic offices, and they're working on energy bills this legislative session. Any fellows here? If you stand to be recognized? We got a couple. All right, good stuff. Next, we would like to thank the chair of the Texas Caucus on Climate and Energy, Representative Aaron Zwiener. And we'd also like to thank the funders, the Energy Foundation, the Mitchell Foundation, the Hershey Foundation, Climate Works, and Meadow Fountain. Marc Nichol, Senior Director of New Reactors and the Nuclear Energy Institute. Go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of nuclear energy, specifically focusing on advanced reactors. But I'll start with the current operating nuclear reactors in the United States. We have 92 reactors within the United States. That's split within 53 states. There are 2 plants, both with 2 reactors here in Texas. There's Comanche Peak and there's South Texas Project. All of these nuclear power plants, they account for about 20% of the U.S. electricity generation, but that's over 50% of the clean energy or zero carbon emitting electricity in the United States. When we look at the question of future energy policies, there's a wide recognition or drive toward decarbonization of the electricity sector. And as people start to think through what does decarbonization look like in the electricity sector, they also start to realize, well, we need it to be reliable and we need it to be affordable. And so there's a number of studies out there that look at how do you make a clean, reliable, affordable energy system? And this study is one of the best, in my opinion, because it's so detailed. It takes a geographic look, 3 kilometers by 3 kilometers, matching location of production and usage of energy. It does that on a time-of-day basis, hour by hour, matching the usage and generation. So it's a very detailed study. And what it found is that if the model was able to pick any source of energy it wanted, it tended to pick a lot of nuclear energy, 43%. Wind and solar also was a great pick for this model, about 50%. But if you look at the nuclear energy that would be needed, that's about 300 gigawatts more of nuclear energy. That's 3 times what we currently have installed. So it's a big build program. The model also looked at, or the modelers looked at the question of, well, what if nuclear was constrained for some reason? And it didn't decide why, but it could be that the regulators can't keep pace with the deployment. Maybe we don't have the supply chain or the workforce in place. And it said if nuclear was constrained, there would still be a lot of nuclear, about 60 gigawatts. And what it could not be deployed would be picked up by other resources, predominantly in this model, wind and solar backed up by storage. Now, both of these scenarios are zero carbon, or actually 95% carbon reduction. Both of these are reliable systems. The difference is in the cost. The nuclear system, the lower cost system, was about $500 billion less than the system that had nuclear constraint. And so it's very important to look at these types of studies and consider what is the actual cost to the ratepayer, the utility bill, more so than just comparing the levelized cost of electricity that most people do. Going through, we have a number of different technologies that are being developed. There's over 60 designs that are in development, some more further along than others, but they generally break down into different categories. Here, there's two ways to look at them. One is size. Where today's nuclear reactor is about 1,000 megawatts, these newer advanced reactors are generally smaller, around 300 megawatts or less. That's a small size. Modular means you can put multiple together and make a bigger plant. There's also micro reactors, which are 1 to 10 megawatts in size, and so these are very small. So they could be useful for remote usages, or they could be great at the end of a transmission line where you have a lot of resilience and reliability issues. The other way to look at them is the type of material that's used to cool the reactor. Water is used to cool the reactors today, and we do have light water, small modular reactors in the advanced category. But we also have different types of coolants so that are not water. We have gas, like helium. We have metals, like sodium. And then we have molten salts, which you can think of table salt that's heated to very high temperatures and become melted. So those are the different ways to look at the technologies. But they all are sort of seen similarly by the electricity grid for the benefits that they provide. There's a lot of benefits. I don't have time to go through all of these, but nuclear power plants have long-term price stability, being a higher upfront capital cost, but a very low operating and fuel cost. Their key signature is their reliable, dispatchable generation. They operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Their capacity factors are very, very high, and they only come down every once in a while for refueling. The advanced reactors are being designed to better integrate with renewables and storage, so you can get a better system out of it. Environmentally friendly. You can look at here the land usage figures. This is 1 terawatt hour of power and how much land would be needed for different types of energy sources. And then one thing that's unique to advanced reactors is black start and island capabilities. So today's nuclear reactors depend on off-site power as part of the safety case. The advanced reactors are being developed so that they don't need off-site power for that safety case, and that allows them to be a black start. So if the entire grid goes down, these can be your first sources of power to start up the rest of the grid. Or if you have national security missions like the Department of Defense, you could completely separate yourself from the grid and provide that type of resilience and security. We are seeing for a long time at the federal level strong bipartisan support. Whether you're Republican or you're Democrat, at the federal level, you love nuclear energy. You may like it for different reasons. Maybe you like it because it's reliable. Maybe you like it because it's zero carbon. Maybe you like it because it offers great high-paying wages, or maybe you like it because it has great economic benefits. But there's strong support, and we've seen that in legislation over the years. A couple of bills to talk about. I'll focus just on this one, the Inflation Reduction Act, because it gives tax credits to the nuclear industry as well as other clean energy technologies at very high levels to help incentivize the deployment and adoption of this technology. When we look at the state level, we also see a lot of action, especially starting more recently. Last year, there were 19 states that introduced legislation related to advanced reactors. 11 of those states passed their bills. This year already, we've seen dozens of bills introduced across a number of different states. We see the bills in three different categories primarily. The first one are reducing barriers. So a barrier might be a moratorium against new nuclear or things like that. And so states are starting to take those down because they know that with those barriers in place, nobody's going to even consider nuclear in their state. The other category is studies and commissions. We see a lot of states that say, well, we kind of know we need nuclear, but we have a lot of questions and we need to understand it better so we can put it in the right context in our energy policy. And so they're going off and doing a bunch of studies. And then the third is incentives. Once the state really knows what they need from nuclear and how to get it, they'll put in incentives like tax credits or training programs for the workforce and those types of things. This is a map that overlays the state support shown in the green-colored states and projects being pursued by industry with the dots on there. This map is already out of date. We know that New Mexico just introduced a bill recently, and so there's a lot of work at the states being done. When you look at the blue dots, there's over 20 projects being considered or planned in the United States and Canada. That comes to as a surprise to many people because you may have only heard of one, or maybe you haven't even heard of any of these. But they range everywhere from larger commercial plants all the way down to university projects. And you can see two in the state here. We have Jordan from Natura Resources representing the ACU project, and Dow Chemicals is interested in a X-energy design. Thank you.
It's time for me to introduce myself. My name is Shelby Webb. I used to be a reporter with the Houston Chronicle covering energy transition and ERCOT. I now work with Politico's E&E News, which is a subscriber-based publication. Now I cover more specifically oil and gas, but I can't give ERCOT up, so I still cover some issues within that. Speaking of ERCOT, we've got some data from them. According to, I guess this is on Friday, this is a fuel generation mix of where all the generation came from within ERCOT. You can see at the bottom there, nuclear is about 10%. Vast majority, most of the time, comes from natural gas, renewables, depending on how hard the wind is blowing and the sun is shining, makes up a decent factor as well, especially wind energy. And people are definitely trying to work on battery storage as well, but that's sort of a growing field here. And then there's a video. Oh, wait, no, I have more information for you. The U.S. Energy Information Administration reports that Texas is among 10 states with the greatest nuclear power generation capacity in the nation, with Texas accounting for about 5% of the national total. As Marc mentioned, there are 2 operating nuclear plants in Texas. The South Texas project near Bay City, about 90 miles southwest of Houston, and Comanche Peak nuclear power plant near Glen Rose, or about 40 miles south of Fort Worth. Both have twin reactors. So before we kick off the panel, I'm going to play a quick 4-minute video about everything that's going on at the South Texas project near Bay City.
Nuclear energy makes about 20% of U.S. electricity and has for nearly 30 years. The South Texas project provides power to Houston, San Antonio, and Austin.
This is a steam electric plant. It's pretty similar to any other steam electric plant, be it coal or other fossil fuel. It is just generating heat. We're using a nuclear source to generate the heat, but simply makes steam. Steam turns a turbine. Turbine turns a generator, makes electricity. It's all that same standard process. The unique part of it is we use nuclear energy to generate the heat that makes the steam. This is the control room of Unit 2 of the South Texas project, currently operating at full power, generating about 1,350 megawatts of electricity going out to the state of Texas.
24/7, 365.
Every day.
Yeah.
All day, all night, whether the wind blows, whether the sun shines, whether it rains, no matter what, that plant's running. Generating power going out, and this plant produces enough power for about 1 million homes.
Yeah.
Just this one unit.
So just how efficient is this facility in terms of efficiency or a capacity factor?
We achieve a capacity factor of 98.7%.
98.7%. That's got to be the most efficient power plant in the world.
But it is actually is where we currently hold the U.S. record for capacity factor on operating these plants.
And in a CO2 sense, it's clean.
It's clean. We generate no carbon dioxide emissions while we're operating this plant.
What is the cost to put a big facility like this in place?
The plant's expensive. The price for a 2-unit site is somewhere on the order of $10 billion. Huge, large investment. But as an overall, when you put it over the life expectancy of the unit, the 40 years plus that the units will operate, and look at the overall cost of power, nuclear power is still at a very, very low cost.
While Unit 1 was fully operational, Unit 2 was undergoing some maintenance. We're in a situation now where the reactor's down.
We're in a refueling outage, and during this refueling outage, we're also doing a number of major maintenance activities. One in particular is we're replacing the reactor head. And what you see when you look down, I mean, you're looking straight down here into this is the reactor vessel. You're looking straight down to the bottom. It has no fuel in it right now. Okay. And so you're just looking straight down through water. You're looking through about 60 feet of water.
Why put it underwater?
Water provides cooling.
Okay.
And primarily in this case, it's there for shielding. Because right now there's no fuel in it, so there's nothing to cool, but it's shielding because down in the very bottom, things are quite radioactive.
You've stored 20 to 25 years of spent fuel from this facility here.
We take that fuel assembly out of the reactor and we store it in the used fuel pool.
What are some of the risks of this? I mean,
of that?
Yeah.
You know, virtually none. And it's sitting here under 45 feet of water, cooled, shielded by the water. The ultimate disposal or reprocessing of used fuel is just not a technological issue. It's strictly a political decision as to have the will to move forward with nuclear energy and the closing the fuel cycle.
So our two reactors are
in the backdrop. Yeah.
You were just talking about over here, they're actually breaking ground. What's going to go on over there?
Yeah, we're doing some pre-construction activities for our new units 3 and 4. They actually are scheduled to come online, commercial operation in 2016 and 2017.
And they're going to be similar size as the two you've got?
Yeah, it'll actually double the size of this facility and make it the largest nuclear power facility in the country.
What's allowing that to happen?
We need baseload power.
Yeah.
And your options when it comes to baseload power are coal, natural gas, and nuclear. And for 30 years, we haven't built nuclear. And when you look at an issue like climate change, you realize this is the only carbon-free source of baseload power we have.
After the Fukushima nuclear accident, STP canceled their plans for the new reactors, and the future of nuclear in the United States seems unclear. But if we don't build new reactors, what will replace our old ones when we need to decommission them? Coal or natural gas?
Representative Gary Gates, Jordan Robison, and Dr. Derek Haas. And I'll slip in over here too.
Of new reactors at the Nuclear Energy Institute. So NEI is an industry association. Our members are many of the companies in the nuclear industry, whether it's utilities, developers of advanced reactor technologies, supply chain, and we represent them in policy, regulatory matters, that sort of thing. In my role, we look at trying to do a couple of different things. I break it up into 4 buckets, which is the policy environment, the regulatory environment, the business environment, and then support with actually moving forward and execution and projects. And so we try to help our members with that.
My name is Jordan Robison. I'm the VP of Engineering and Program Management for Natura Resources. Natura was stood up to advance advanced nuclear technologies, and so our primary work that we're doing right now is sponsoring research that's taking place at Abilene Christian University, the University of Texas, Texas A&M, and Georgia Tech to actually design, license, and build an advanced research reactor at Abilene Christian University so that we can put this technology into operation, begin gathering data, studying those reactors, and deploy that technology moving forward.
Hi, everybody. I'm Derek Haas. I'm an associate professor at the University of Texas at Austin, and I'm a dad. And so this energy issue is something that I feel strongly about, and I'm encouraged to see so much interest in nuclear energy as an opportunity out there. So I primarily work in science related to nuclear energy and nuclear security, and lately we've been working on a project to assist in the design of a molten salt reactor. It's really exciting to have so much nuclear work done, really being focused here in Texas, and I think we have a great opportunity. And then last thing I'll just say is that I brought a radiation detector, and y'all happen to work in one of the most radioactive buildings in the city, so if you want to check it out afterwards, let me know and we can take a look at it.
Yeah, Gary Gates, State Rep. My top issue is trying to introduce vocational training full-time for 11th and 12th graders. One of the biggest things that's affecting our economy and is a lack of skilled labor, and whether it's working in these kind of plants or manufacturing or electricians, plumbers. In the state of Texas, in 2019 we had 390,000 kids graduate high school, but only 452 of them were able to take at least 3 hours in, and this is combined, pipe fitting, welding, diesel mechanic, and electrical and plumbing. And so what my bill does is making it full-time for 11th and 12th graders, trying to give, allowing them to have enough hours to develop certificates that would allow them to go into high-skilled labor industry at a high starting wage and be able to build a career from there.
Great. Well, Dr. Haas, just quickly, can you just tell everyone briefly why this is the most radioactive building to try to calm some nerves?
Sure. So the granite that the Capitol is made out of is actually more radioactive than most materials. And so the main reason I brought it up was to basically show everybody that there's radiation around us all the time. We tend to be afraid of it because we don't quite understand it. It's not something we can sense. But we're 4 times the limit, not the limit, we're 4 times the level that you would be outside, and it's just normal. Everybody goes to work, you go about your day.
Great. Well, I guess to kick off the official questions, can you tell us a little bit about the state of nuclear in Texas right now, sort of an overview of where we're at in the industry? Don't know who wants to take that first, but
I'll give it a shot and say the state of nuclear is relatively boring, and we've probably learned that energy systems that are boring can be good because they're just sitting there producing energy, and we don't worry too much about them. So it would be great if we had it more exciting on the positive side, if we were developing more reactors and deploying them. And I think we've got an opportunity there. So I think we're already a leader in energy, and doing more nuclear would be great.
Sure. Anything else y'all would like to add?
Well, I think the video about STP said it well in terms of the value that nuclear energy is bringing to the state. The one thing I'll point out, and I know there's a state fact sheet in the back that talks about nuclear. The contribution, I think, there is about 10% of the state's electricity generation, and just to compare that to the national average of 20%. So you're less than the national average. So I don't know if you have a competitive spirit to try to be better than other states, but that's a challenge for you if you are.
Well, something I'm sure a lot of folks in this room know. This legislative session, dealing with ERCOT and the fuel mix and everything has been sort of top of mind. You have a lot of folks who are saying we need more natural gas generation, something with an on-off switch, and then you have people saying, well, we can't, throw nuclear or renewables out. But that conversation has sort of largely seemed to ignore nuclear. Can you talk a little bit about why that might be, and whether or not there is any momentum among groups to bring it into the conversation?
Again, I'll give it a shot. I think, people, especially of a certain age that have experienced the Cold War and threats of nuclear war, basically have just an emotional aversion to nuclear. And I think that's changing, but I think it's a slow change. And so I think nuclear clearly provides an option in stabilizing our electric grid. And I think another one is that people think that nuclear can't ramp. It doesn't ramp as fast as natural gas, but it can certainly ramp quickly and do some load following. So I think it's mostly a lack of education. And I think an opportunity that we have is to increase people's level of understanding of the actual risks of nuclear that are very different than perceptions, but also roll into that the benefits as well.
Yeah, I'd add to that. I think there's 2 things in my mind that contribute to it. One is the products that the nuclear industry has offered to the market. So for a long time, we've had one product for the market. It's been 1,000 megawatts base load, great for the electric grid and what it does. But not everybody wants 1,000 megawatts. And so what we've actually seen is over the last 10 years or so, the market wants smaller increments, and that's why these new products of 300 megawatts and less are really what we're hearing from the market and the customers that they want. So now we do have a product that the market wants. The other is that I think there's been a shift where for a long time it's been a focus on what is the lowest short-term price of energy. And people are starting to realize, well, that may not be what serves us best, and we need to have a long-term view. And so when you look at the short-term prices, nuclear being a high capital cost doesn't do well. It takes a while for us to amortize those costs. But when you look at the long run, our cost and our value really start to shine.
Anything else I would like to add? Well, talking about those new products that you had mentioned, tell us a little bit about like the new technologies that you see emerging. I mean, we saw that map of, new projects that are under construction, and I know, folks have at least probably seen headlines about potential breakthroughs in nuclear fusion. What's going on?
You want to start with your design?
Yeah, so we're actually in Abilene right now working on developing a liquid-fueled molten salt reactor. So it's one of the advanced technologies out there. Primary difference being that your current reactor technology utilizes solid fuel and water to cool the system. In our reactor system, we're actually moving towards a design where you, instead of having water as a coolant, you have melted down salt, so molten salt that melts at about 400 degrees Celsius and then operates around 600 to 700 degrees Celsius, and actually has your fuel dissolved in the salt. And so what you end up with is reactors that are safer, even more efficient than the current reactor fleet that's out there, and much more flexible as far as how they're able to be deployed. Built smaller, built in, the idea is build them in a warehouse, ship them to site and install them versus large capital intensive construction projects on site. And so we're actively moving forward, specifically Abilene Christian University, who's going to be the owner and operator of that reactor, to put a reactor in operation, to show that an advanced reactor can be licensed with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and to get one up and operating so that we can begin gathering data and studying that reactor and developing them commercially moving forward. So that's just liquid fueled molten salt reactors. That is one of many different advanced reactor technologies, and one that's actively moving forward here already within the state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we're seeing similar things in a lot of the advanced reactor designs. So as we started to make them smaller, we were working against the conventional wisdom that you get economies of size. So the bigger you make them, the cheaper they're going to be. What we found is when you make them smaller, wow, you can actually make them simpler. And as you make them simpler, wow, you actually make them safer. So it's a case where these advanced reactors are becoming less expensive and safer at the same time. And we're breaking the mold of conventional thinking here. And so exactly what Jordan just said about his design, we're seeing in other designs as well. And so it's the economics, I think, that is really helping to in this.
Sure. You're mentioning that this is all happening at Abilene Christian University, and sort of dovetailing Representative Gates with the work that you're doing on your belt. Tell us a little bit about that sort of job creation for students and what that might look like, and how that could involve nuclear or that sort of a thing.
Well, one reason I kind of joined the Energy Caucus was every power plant that's out there and the building of them needs skilled labor. And if you ask any of those plant operators, they'll tell you they're lacking skilled labor, whether it's electricians, plumbers, pipe fitters, welders. And so what I'm about is trying, the future growth of our economy has got to depend upon that we have a good supply of those skilled workers. And so that's what I'm focused on. And trying to, 50% of kids don't go to college, and other kids that go to college, 50% don't get a degree in 5 years. And those that wind up with a degree, only 15% wind up using that degree in the field that they went to college for. And so one of the reasons we just don't have good vocational programs in our school. And my bill isn't for every CTE program. It's designed at actually industry, and the Workforce Commission is going to create what programs will be available to be full-time. It's just not for every type of CTE program. It's really to fill the skilled labor needs that we need in places like these kind of plants. Mm-hmm.
And I actually did my homework for this one. So somewhere around 2,000 people are employed at the nuclear power plants in the state right now, about half at each nuclear power plant, Comanche Peak and South Texas project. And I really applaud the build that you're working on. So a lot of people think of nuclear engineers when you think of a workforce for nuclear power, but for every nuclear engineer, I don't know, I'm going to say, what do you think, 10 non-nuclear engineer trained folks? Something like that? Yeah, so thank you. That you need additional skilled labor to run the plant. And so, being at the university, I think we have a significant mission to produce trained engineers that are going to run the plants. We also need people that are going to make sure that they run correctly. And so, and I think the other potential outcome here is not just the direct jobs that happen at nuclear power plants, but when companies look at relocating or expanding in different areas, having a reliable electric grid is going to be one of the things that they choose, especially in industrial areas. And so having opportunities to either have a more robust electric grid or even behind-the-meter nuclear reactors that run power plants and data centers and things like that is a real opportunity.
Sure. Well, I mean, workforce shortages definitely seem like an issue for the industry, but what sort of challenges is it also facing, Texas-specific and maybe not so Texas-specific? And, what do you think could be done to sort of facilitate this, the growth of the industry, or to make it a little more ubiquitous, I guess, in a state like Texas?
I guess I'm fairly optimistic on this. I'm in the classes every day just about, and our enrollment in nuclear classes in the last 18 months has tripled. And so interest in young people is there. They want to learn about nuclear energy. They want to help drive that forward. They just need the jobs to go out there and do it.
Are there other legislative issues that you've seen, or things that might be sort of like a roadblock in the way of its growth right now? I know we talked about some of those challenges with perceptions and things like that, but.
Yeah, I think one of the big challenges is just licensing through the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, right? So that's one of the things that we're focused on with our project, is trying to go into the NRC as small and simple as possible with the design to be able to demonstrate licensure. So we're one of 2 advanced reactors that are being reviewed by the NRC right now. And so one is just kind of clearing that legislative hurdle. And the NRC is it's changed a lot. We've got former NRC staff working with us that has told us, hey, I don't recognize this version of the NRC. They're friendly, they're engaging, they're working with you. It's almost like they want you to succeed at getting this license. And so the NRC is working to do that, but we've got to work alongside them to put technologies in front of them so that they can really kind of sharpen that pencil on what it looks like to license and deploy advanced reactors.
Mm-hmm.
I think another area here is sustained commitment to success. A lot of the things that I'll focus more on the federal government here. I'm not as familiar with how state government works, but the federal government tends to change its priorities fairly often, especially in nuclear energy. And so one of the pleasures that's been working with Natura is Natura has a goal. They're going to go for it, and they're not going to be, they're not going to, see a squirrel and go chasing off in the other direction, I hope. And I think that that's an area where legislatures can really help, is to decide that this is something that's going to happen and then follow through on that vision.
Yeah, I'll add to that. So, we see the opportunities or challenges in a number of areas. So certainly the regulatory one that you talked to, and the policy one. So at the federal level, we've seen the policies get set that are really helping to fuel advanced reactor deployments. And in the states that are taking action to do similar policies that complement the federal ones, we're starting to see action as well. So if a state is really wanting nuclear energy to succeed, then passing supportive policies is certainly helpful in that. The other areas, we talked about workforce. Workforce is certainly, when we talk about expansion of nuclear energy, is going to be a huge challenge. And so bills like yours will help a lot. We also see the supply chain being an issue. So if we're going to build all these advanced reactors, then we're going to need the factories to do it.
Sure. Well, outside of sort of regulatory hurdles, I mean, one that you mentioned was sort of the emotional hurdle, and a lot of that sort of deals with potential environmental impacts and that sort of a thing. What sort of environmental impacts have been seen in Texas, especially in areas by the South Texas plant or the Comanche Peak plant? And how has it sort of affected the nearby communities as well, like Bay City or I forget where the other one's located. Glen Rose.
I can speak at a national level. And so a couple of the things. So if we take environmental and public opinion, and from an environmental standpoint, nuclear is extremely environmentally friendly. Mm-hmm. So we talked about the carbon-free benefits. It actually has one of the lowest total carbon footprints if you consider the front end and the back end and all of the activities on par with wind. And then you look at the low land utilization. It doesn't have any other emissions in all of that. So it's environmentally friendly, and so it does really well. We have programs at the plants currently in order to meet all of those laws to monitor and make sure that the environment is protected as well. On the public perception, what we see nationally is strong support for nuclear energy. I think it's over 70%. And if you look at the communities surrounding a nuclear power plant, it's even higher. So what we find is those that understand and live close to nuclear power plants support it even more.
And I guess I've been one of those folks. So I haven't been to the plants here in Texas, I'm ashamed to say, as a native Texan. But I used to live 10 miles away from the nuclear plant in Washington State. And I could see the steam that rose out of the cooling towers from my back porch. I'd hang out there and say, yep, there's a nuclear reactor. I'm glad that I'm getting my electricity. As a technical expert on that, I had no problem with that. I think there is a level of education that gets you to the point where you can assess a risk and say, yeah, I'll accept that to have reliable electricity. And I think that's the one area where we just don't have that too much because it's so hard to relate to nuclear, radiation and exposure.
Yeah, if I can add real quick to the perception gap. So I talked about 70% support for nuclear, but if you go and ask the same people, do you think your neighbor supports nuclear energy? Only 40% think their neighbor supports nuclear energy. So what I see is we don't talk about it because even though we ourselves might like nuclear energy, we think the other person doesn't. And so that we need to get past that mental block and we need to start talking about it more.
Sure. And what about the waste as well? I mean, these plants create radioactive waste, and I think that scares a lot of people. What about the transportation and the eventual storage of that? How is that sort of working, and especially, at the two Texas plants?
Yeah, so the thing is, for any technology, you're going to have waste, and you're going to have to deal with it. And I think there's three important things to look at. One is to be able to do it safely. The nuclear industry's been managing its used fuel safely for decades. And in fact, we have independent regulatory approval and verification that we can store it safely on site for decades more. The reason is because of the form of the used fuel. So if you look at a new fuel assembly and a used fuel assembly, visually they're identical. The difference is one has radiation, the other doesn't. Now, we have to protect against the radiation, but because it's solid, because it's a small volume, it's very easy to do that with concrete and steel. And that goes with the small amount of used nuclear fuel in the United States. For the amount of energy we produce, very, very small, it would fill a football field is how much it is. And so we're able to do that. You have to be able to pay for it. We collect money as we go. We have $40 billion set aside. You have to have a place to put it. Now, Yucca Mountain is legally designated. Some people say, well, we want a different location. It's important to get this right. So let's let the policymakers and Congress figure this out, because in the meantime, we can deal with it safely. And by the way, there's over 90% of the energy is still remaining. And so while today it's not economically feasible to recycle, someday it will be. And so we're going to be happy that we have that as an asset.
And that recycling is actually one of the things we're working on. We are developing reactors that could be sited with the existing reactors. You could take the spent fuel from those reactors, put them in as fuel for the next reactor that sits there next to it, and burn up that 97%, as well as make the waste much shorter lived. So it's dangerous for maybe 300 years instead of several thousand years. So there are a lot of technical advances that we can make really in the near term. And we have spent nuclear fuel here in Austin at our reactor at the University of Texas. So if anybody wants a tour, come on out. We'll show you around, and you can take a look at the reactor and the spent fuel as well.
Is that more or less radioactive than the granite here?
It's more radioactive than any 30 feet of water. So when you're standing on top of the reactor, it's actually lower levels of radiation than leaning up against the wall out here.
Oh, geez. Okay. Well, I think that's good to know. Don't lean against any window or walls here. That's the point taken. I think we're ready for an audience Q&A. If anybody has some questions, I don't know if you'd like to come up here, or if you say it, I'll just repeat it here so other folks can hear it. Sure. So, definitely some surprise that was discontinued, sort of a lack of public education or information about sort of the benefits of nuclear and sort of the state of nuclear in Texas right now. What's y'all's response to that?
Absolutely. More public education, more public discussion about nuclear energy is absolutely what's needed.
Who's going to do that?
Well, I know the Nuclear Energy Institute is trying, but we're just one organization, so we need others that have a voice to also talk about nuclear energy.
And there are a few of us local, so let us know and we'll come chat.
All right, any other questions? Just to repeat the question for the folks who are watching elsewhere, she's asking about, Texas has been going through a drought, and these facilities use a lot of water, and especially, building one in Abilene or out in West Texas where water is already very limited, and, the drought's really exacerbated things. How do you sort of balance those concerns, and how viable are some of these new projects and new technologies with the sort of water crunch that we've been seeing for the past few years?
Right, so that's one of the benefits of the molten salt reactor technology that we're working with, is we don't rely upon water to cool our system. So we don't have to be located next to a large body of water to circulate water through to cool off our fuel elements and circulate it back out. We're relying upon that liquid salt to do the cooling for us. So in our system, like I said, that salt is going to melt around 400 degrees Celsius. We're going to be at around 600 to 700 degrees Celsius when we operate, but that salt, it doesn't want to turn to a steam until it gets up to 1400 degrees Celsius. So it's just going to be operating at atmospheric pressure. We're going to run it through a heat exchanger. Because it's a research reactor, we can't produce electricity. We'll just release that heat via radiators. We study the system, but we don't require any sort of water to cool our system, which is a good thing. We don't have that much water in Abilene, and like you said, out in West Texas, same sort of thing. And so a lot of these advanced reactor technologies, whether it be liquid fueled molten salt reactors, whether it be high temp gas reactors, are relying upon things other than water as a coolant, and so you can get around those issues.
And most of the advanced reactors are being designed for, we call it dry air cooling. So you're not using a local body water, local body of water to cool as the ultimate heat sink. I will say also there are water cooled small reactors that are being air cooled. And they do have water in the reactor. They don't take that water from the local body source. They bring that in from other places because it's highly purified water.
And I would say that maybe the most important takeaway with nuclear and water is that nuclear can be a huge source of water for Texas and really everywhere, because we can desalinate water both from the Gulf as well as from groundwater that's brackish. So deploying more nuclear means more fresh water, not less.
The question was, there's sort of a race when it comes to the energy transition. If we're looking at, different new technologies, geothermal and whatnot, versus nuclear, what is the timeline for the advanced nuclear technologies that are coming out? And is there a price per megawatt hour sort of formulation that you all have come up with?
Yeah, so for all those projects I showed, the 20 projects that I showed on the map, they're all planned to be in operation by 2030. So now currently it's about 8 to 10 years to get a new plant in operation. We're trying to get that schedule down to 5 years. So that's the goal, or less. That's the goal. In terms of a cost per kilowatt hour or megawatt hour, right now we're looking around the $50, $60 a megawatt hour, but I would caution against comparing levelized cost of electricity because you really compare apples and oranges, and I'd point you back to the study that I showed, which is the focus should be on the cost to the ratepayers and what they have in their utility bills. Levelized cost of electricity hide a lot of cost that aren't included.
Yeah, so one of the really interesting things about liquid-fueled reactors like a molten salt reactor is that it produces radioactive materials that we use for medical purposes. So we can pull those materials out, you can purify them, and then ship them to hospitals around the state and around the country to use on things like heart scans. So if you know anybody that's ever had a heart scan where you get the video of the heart, that was done with a radioactive substance that was injected into their veins. It makes their way through the bloodstream, and then it gives off radiation. You put detectors around the person to actually measure that and take a video of what's going on, and that can help diagnose what's going on with somebody's vascular system. So and that's just one example. There are hundreds of isotopes inside of a reactor, and now that we have the opportunity to get in there and pull some of those out, we can start going for other things. There are radioisotopes that have proven very effective in cancer treatments, but there just aren't enough of those on the planet without more reactors that would produce that material to be sent out there just for the studies, let alone for worldwide adoption.
Yeah, we've had some really interesting conversations with medical providers where we'll go in and say, hey, what isotopes are you looking for? And they'll say, well, this is useful for this. And it's like, no. Like, pick from this entire chart. Like, these are all the things that are going to be produced. They're like, oh, well, nobody's ever asked us that question before. Like, we're going to have to go look at that and check out some of these isotopes that are normally not available to us that you could potentially have access to and see what benefits those could potentially have for us. I mean, it's a natural byproduct of what we're doing while we're generating electricity, is those isotopes are being formed.
Sure, and the question is about the advanced nuclear facilities and their ability to ramp.
Yeah, so I don't have specific numbers, but I can tell you about the studies that have been done, and they show that the advanced reactors are going to be able to ramp in a way that would match the demands of the grid. And so I know of a specific study that was done for the UAMPS project and their wind farm out there, and they showed that nuclear can ramp right with the ups and downs of wind to match it.
One of the really interesting ways we've looked at it, and Dr. Haas and his team actually did the study for us, is one of the things we looked at a city in Texas. I think it was about 200,000 homes is what we looked at. Said, all right, what is the energy need during peak summer day? What is that energy need? And so one of the benefits that we have with some of these advanced technologies with the higher temperatures is there's other processes that we can use to kind of fill that gap. So we can provide enough electricity to meet these high demands on electricity, and then when the demand drops, we take that excess process heat and use it to desalinate water or use it to produce ethylene or hydrogen. So you take these high process heats and divert them into another stream. And so one of the things that we came out with, I think it was, we were providing enough electricity with, I think it was 400 megawatts electric for 200,000 homes during peak summer energy needs. And then at night when that need went down because it cooled off, we were producing enough water for about 60,000 households, just using that capacity that we were operating at. So there's different ways that you can ramp and control based upon that.
Ma'am? Taking some issue with what's been said here today in terms of the environmental impacts, potential impacts to water that's being released into the community, health impacts nearby the plants, some things that might be put out there, and saying that money could be better spent on other renewables such as wind, solar, battery storage, that sort of a thing. Your thoughts on those comments?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate your opinion, but I think the facts of the matter do not agree with your statements.
And I'll just follow up and say that several of the things that you said there were true. Nuclear reactors release radioactive material. That does not in and of itself hurt people. The levels of the material that's released is what matters. And the reasons that the reactors are regulated in the way that they are is that they don't release levels that are harmful to people.
Sure. So the question is, UT Austin is requesting more than $18 million for a small modular reactor, or the salt reactor. And what would that look like without the cash infusion? What would the process look like?
Right. So the University of Texas is asking for funding to develop what's called a digital twin of a molten salt reactor. And the point of the digital twin is to develop computer models that are based on physics and chemistry to try to predict what's happening in that reactor. As we build the reactor, we can actually gather data from that reactor, test our models, and refine the models so that they're better. The real benefit for that is not in this first research reactor. The benefit is in pushing that technology out towards technological readiness for more wider adoption, where you can predict what's going to happen with small design changes to the reactors, where normally you would have to have years of operating experience before you are allowed to operate with that change. Now we can try to predict that with our supercomputers and models that are developed for those.
All right, got to wrap up here, but thank y'all for coming. Before we go, if your boss is interested in collaborating with other legislators on energy policy or implementing some policy solutions to support new energy technologies such as carbon capture, utilization and storage, or hydrogen, please encourage them to join the Texas Energy and Climate Caucus. They'll be having their first meeting tomorrow, and if you have any questions, please reach out to Patricia Zabala. And thank you again for coming.